The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
We did a marriage workshop a few nights ago here in Muncie. So I opened it up, and Rabbi Moshe Zev Lamb, who's a marriage therapist here in Muncie, did the workshop. He shared a story of a person who came to him for therapy. It was so meaningful and very emotional story. There was this boy. There was this father. I guess he went on a trip. Anyway, I don't know exactly the circumstances, but he bought gifts for his children. So for the older children, he bought a pen, a nice pen, a Parker pen or another fancy pen. And for the little ones, there were two little ones, I think a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old. And he bought them a little fire engine truck. Okay, so the 3-year-old got the fire engine truck, and I think maybe the 6-year-old or the 8-year-old, a little bit older, got the fire engine truck, and the older kids got the pen. The problem is that the 3-year-old's fire truck broke. I don't know, the battery died or it broke. It broke. So he was hysterical. He was crying, and he was hysterical. Nuvas Tutman. The 6-year-old didn't want to give up his fire truck, his fire engine, right? So the older boy, there was an older boy, I guess, a teenager, and he says, I have an idea. Let's give the 6-year-old a pen. I'll give him my pen because he's a big boy. And he'll give the fire engine truck to the 3-year-old because our 6-year-old is already a very big boy. So lovingly, the father took away the fire truck from the 6-year-old and gave him a pen because he's a big boy. And he gave the fire truck to the 3-year-old. And everybody kept on telling him what a big boy he is, and therefore he gives the fire truck to his brother, and he ends up with the pen. Seems like a nice story, right? And everybody was, of course, very thankful to the older boy who gave up his pen to calm down the 3-year-old. And Mr. Lamb says, 20 years later, 30 years later, this person is sitting in his office and crying. And he says that all night he cried. That big boy who lost his fire truck, that 6-year-old, cried all night that he lost his fire truck. He didn't want the pen. He didn't want the pen. He didn't want to be the big boy. He was forced to be the big boy. But for him, the fire truck was so much more important because this is what he wanted. In terms of objective value, we know what is more important. But my desire is not about objective value. It's about what I want. And that's such an important idea. So for 20 years, he carried this. And he had to cry it out years later. He said all night he was crying in his room. He couldn't show it. Why couldn't he show it? Because he was the big boy. He didn't want to be humiliated even more. But 20 years later, he was having a difficulty expressing emotions to his spouse and to his children because he shut down many of his emotions that night because the feeling was too painful. Now you could say, oh, that's part of growing up. Somebody in the crowd said, oh, that's life. That's just growing up. That's how life works. It's true. That's exactly how life works. But we have to acknowledge these little stories which seem insignificant, but they're very significant because these emotional memories in a child's life when you're an adult can impact you so significantly, and they're paralyzing me, and they're suppressing or destroying or eliminating or holding back a certain part of me that is so authentic and is so important for life and for the joys of life and the experience of life, but I can't have it because I shut down then.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org